Hey, what is going on everyone? In this video I'm doing a comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S5 against the Sony Xperia Z2, and yes, I do say Z because I am Canadian. Now on the left side we have the S5 and on the right we have the Z2. You'll notice that the notification light on the S5 is a little bit brighter than it is on the Z2. However, the Z2 notification light is a little bit larger, so in this regard I'll give the notification lights a tie. In terms of physical design, it is easy to notice that the Z2 is slightly taller than the S5. In terms of width and thickness, there's only less than a millimeter difference between both devices. And even in terms of weight, the Z2 is only 18 grams heavier than the S5. So technically speaking, on paper, the S5 is better in terms of mobility, but in the hand it's really hard to tell the difference between the two. In terms of comfort, the Z2 isn't exactly the most comfortable device to hold. That's mainly because most of the edges on the device are straight, there's not much curves. Whereas the S5 has some slight curves around the edges at the back. This makes it feel a little bit more natural to hold in the hand. Not only that, the material at the back is very soft, it feels great in your hand when you're holding it, whereas the Z2 is just simply flat. So in terms of comfort, the S5 is better. However, when it comes to appearance, it's easy to tell that the Z2 is the more attractive of the two devices. Now both devices are IP certified, which basically means they're dust and water resistant, and they're both water resistant up to 1 meter for 30 minutes. But what's unique about the S5 is that you still get access to the battery at the back, despite being water resistant, so it can be removed and changed, whereas the battery on the Z2 is non-removable. The Galaxy S5 is rocking a 2800 mAh battery, whereas the Z2 has a 3200 mAh battery. Now the Z2 does outshine the battery performance of the S5 in terms of day-to-day regular usage, but of course both devices do have some unique battery saving modes. And if you want to see the exact battery stats in their testing, be sure to check out their individual video reviews, and you can find links to those videos in the video description. Both devices have gorgeous 1080p displays, and the Z2 on the top has a 5.2-inch IPS LCD screen, whereas the Galaxy S5 below has a 5.1-inch Super AMOLED display, and in terms of sharpness they're both pretty equal. They both look fantastic, and they don't exactly provide the most realistic of colors. That's because they're a bit saturated. This isn't exactly a bad thing, it just doesn't look as natural as say on the HTC M8. The colors pop a little bit more on both of these devices instead. Both of them are on max brightness, and I do notice that the S5 is a tiny bit brighter, but the Z2 has a tiny bit more color pop. So both of them bring something unique to the table, so in terms of display, I'll give them a tie. Moving over to RAM, the Z2 is a clear winner because it has 3 gigs of RAM, while the S5 only has 2 gigs. In terms of processor, both devices are running a Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 Crate 400 quad-core processor, and the Galaxy S5 is fast, but I noticed it's a tiny bit slower than the Z2 general performance. And despite the Z2 processor being slightly underclocked than the S5, I noticed that it's a bit more responsive. Not by a huge amount, but it's strange that it is the case, because the Z2 processor is just a tiny bit slower. Moving on to GPU, both of them have an Adreno 330 GPU, and what you're seeing now is the Galaxy S5, and it does perform great. The processor coupled with the great screen and the GPU performs fantastic. But again, I am noticing that's just a tiny bit sluggish by fractions of a second compared to the Z2, whereas the Z2 performs in terms of sharpness and game clarity just as good as the S5, but it's a tiny bit more responsive. So in terms of the better processor performance, I have to give it to the Z2 by a tiny amount, and also goes to gaming performance again by a tiny amount. Now in terms of connectivity, the Galaxy S5 has a slight advantage here. You see both devices have the usual like Wi-Fi, which supports 802.11, A, B, G, N, and AC, Bluetooth, GPS, mirror casting, DLNA, and all other good stuff. But the Galaxy S5 also has an IR blaster, which means you can use your Galaxy S5 as a remote control for your TV and other various home theater devices, whereas the Z2 doesn't have one. Not only that, the Galaxy S5 also has something called Download Booster, which allows you to combine the LTE and Wi-Fi speeds together to download files faster. Both devices are available with 16 gigs of internal storage, and in terms of external storage with a microSD card slot, you can reach up to a maximum of 128 gigs. The only real advantage the Galaxy S5 has is if you buy the 32 gig internal version. Otherwise, they're a tie in terms of storage. Okay, so at this point I'm going to do my usual speaker comparison test. I'm going to play the exact same YouTube channel on both phones, which is a review video of the Xperia Z2 found on my YouTube channel. I'm going to blast the volume to max on both devices, but when I play it on the Galaxy S5, I'm going to lift the device up because it has a speaker on the rear, whereas the Z2 has dual front-facing speakers, so I don't have to lift it up. So let's start with the Galaxy S5. As they slow down, it looks pretty clear and it works quite well. And what you're seeing and hearing is being entirely captured with the Xperia Z2 camera. Okay, now over to the Xperia Z2. As they slow down, it looks pretty clear and it works quite well. And what you're seeing and hearing is being entirely captured with the Xperia Z2 camera. This particular clip is so it might be hard for the camera microphone to pick it up, but with my own ears I can notice that the Xperia Z2 is just slightly louder. A little disappointing for dual front-facing speakers, but yes, it is a little bit louder than the Galaxy S5. But one thing is for sure is that the quality of the sound is vastly superior on the Xperia Z2, so the Z2 does have the better speaker performance. The Sony Xperia Z2 is better in terms of being a multimedia device because it has dual front-facing speakers, the GPU and processor have great gaming performance, and of course it's always a pleasure to watch movies on this fantastic screen. The Sony Xperia Z2 software interface is very clean, very minimalistic, kind of like a Nexus device, but that's a good thing. I noticed that the software is very snappy and responsive because of that. Not only that, most importantly, it's very easy to use and navigate. Whereas the interface on the Galaxy S5 has a lot more going on, sometimes it can feel a bit overcrowded. Now of course many people won't mind it, they'll actually be okay with this, but the system settings menu, which is perhaps the most important menu in the entire phone, is a huge giant mess, as with many other Samsung devices. Now moving over to still images, the S5 images are 16:9 whereas the Z2 images are 4:3. And notice that the S5 images have better color, they're brighter, and they're more vivid and more attractive, but the Z2 images are slightly sharper, but they're not as colorful, of course. And in terms of low lighting performance, the Z2 does perform better in low lighting situations for still images only. And you can find links to the camera sample videos in the video description. So they both have the advantage over another for still images. Okay, so all picture, video, and audio being recorded is straight into the Galaxy S5. This is being recorded in 4K, which is 2160p, and then compressed down to 1080p to match the rest of the codecs and specs of this video. And what I find great about the Galaxy S5 camera is that it does tell you there's going to be a time limit of 5 minutes per recording session, but it never overheats. The camera never overheats on me. Furthermore, I also have manual focus, so I can touch the screen to focus on this plant in front of me, then I'll go into the plants in the background. And you'll see the foreground is now blurred, and if I press autofocus on the screen, it tries to autofocus back to normal. So now let me switch over to the Xperia Z2. So I'm standing in the exact same spot as when I recorded the Galaxy S5 sample clip, and this is 4K recording with the Xperia Z2, and you'll notice that everything is zoomed in a lot more. I noticed that the Galaxy S5 has a nice wide angle, whereas the cropping on the Z2 is just too much. It zooms in way too much sometimes, so if an object is up close, you'll have to take a few steps back. Furthermore, there's no manual focus in 4K recording on the Xperia Z2, unlike the Galaxy S5, which does. And the worst part is, if you're recording for 3.5 minutes or more, the Xperia Z2 camera will most likely overheat on you and force close, and then you can't use it for another 2 to 3 minutes because it needs to cool down. So on that note, the Galaxy S5 camera, in terms of performance, is vastly superior to the Z2 camera. Not only that, I'm noticing that color detail is better on the Galaxy S5. That comment, well, the last few comments will make a lot of people upset, but it is the reality. Okay, so now I'm recording with the front-facing camera, all audio and video, on the Galaxy S5, and it's extremely bright, that's why I'm kind of squinting. But I'm trying to get all the sunlight onto me so you can see more details of color. I noticed that the Galaxy S5 front-facing camera suffers from the same problem as Xperia Z2 front-facing camera. If there's a little bit light lost, you'll get a lot of noise in the image. Both of them are pretty clear, but I find that the Z2 front-facing camera is slightly better than the Galaxy S5 front-facing camera, but you guys can be the judge of that. Okay, so all picture and audio is being recorded with the front-facing camera of the Xperia Z2, and again, it has the same problem as the Galaxy S5 front-facing camera. Well, it's not really a problem, but if there's a little bit of light lost, I notice a lot of noise in the image and stuff. But you know, it's a front-facing camera, it's nothing special. Both of them aren't anything great, but they're not bad either. But in terms of general sharpness, I personally find that the front-facing camera of the Xperia Z2 is better. The S5 camera app can look a little intimidating at first, but everything is actually labeled out quite well and it's easy to navigate. And there are plenty of options available. In fact, if there aren't enough already, you always have the option to download more from the Samsung App Store. The camera app itself is one of the best available on a smartphone. In fact, you might not even need to download a third-party camera app from the Google Play Store. Whereas the Z2 camera app is a lot more cleaner and easier to use, but it doesn't have as many functions, but you still have special ones like this, which is called AR mode, which allows you to interact with virtual reality objects and creatures. The annoying thing is that you can't take 20.7 megapixel images in auto mode, you must take them in manual mode. If you try to take pictures in auto mode, you'll only be capping at 8 megapixels for still images. Overall, in terms of the camera app and camera quality in general, the S5 is better. The Z2 doesn't have a lot of exclusive features, but there are some special ones like connecting a DualShock 3 controller to the Z2, connecting to other Xperia devices, and of course, exclusive content from the PlayStation Store and of course from Sony. But it's a well-known fact that the Galaxy S5 has perhaps the most amount of features on any smartphone available in the world today, straight out of the box. And with that said, in terms of exclusive features, the Galaxy S5 wins. In fact, there are so many exclusive features with the Galaxy S5, I had to make a completely separate video for it. You can find a link to that video in the video description. And lastly, when it comes to phone call quality, I find that they're nothing special, both devices, but they're nothing terrible either. I find that the Galaxy S5 is just a tiny bit better than the Xperia Z2 for phone call quality. So if you were to ask me my personal opinion as to which device I prefer, remember this is my personal opinion because people actually literally get mad if you say something even remotely bad about a device they like, which is kind of bizarre to me. I would choose the Galaxy S5. Now it's not perfect, I know that. It has some problems, like the system settings menu is a huge giant mess. The Galaxy S4, the Note 3, the Galaxy S5 all have this problem, and Samsung still hasn't learned to keep things clean and simple. But generally the Galaxy S5 feels complete. Even when you're recording a 4K video, it tells you that hey, in 5 minutes it's gonna stop and you gotta press record again to record another 5K video. It tells you that right off the bat. The problem with the Xperia Z2 with 4K recording is that after 3.5 minutes, roughly 4 minutes, the camera will just shut off in 4K video recording because it's overheating. And then you can't use the camera for another 2-3 minutes again. So if you had a special event, do not use 4K video recording. Stick to 1080p, you will not have an overheating problem. 1080p video recording, I was able to get 50 minutes, as in 5-0, continuous non-stop recording. So 1080p works great. Still images, the quality is fantastic. Just avoid 4K recording, it's a terrible experience. Furthermore, the dual front-facing speakers work when you're watching a video or playing a video game, but when you're receiving a text message, email, phone call, any type of alert basically, only the bottom speaker works. Both don't work. I don't know why that is. It's a software problem. So the Xperia Z2 is not complete out of the box. It kind of feels rushed on Sony's part. It's nothing terrible, but it's not great, and I really expected more from the device. I actually find that a lot of reviewers don't mention the problems that I do because they're in a rush to get their review on the internet first, whether it be on YouTube or a written article on the net. I actually did a lot of research with this device. That's why I'm possibly one of the only people that actually mention these problems, because I want to make sure that you, the consumer, doesn't make a decision that you might regret in terms of purchasing this device. Be sure to check out my review of the Xperia Z2. You'll find a lot more details and explanation as to why and how I found these problems. So, if you want to check out more videos of the Galaxy S5, Xperia Z2 camera sample videos, individual review videos, all that good stuff, be sure to check out their videos in the video description. Hit the like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.